fact that I'm the only one in this interview right now.
Mm-hmm. Well, first off, thank you for doing this interview with me. First question is, how young were you when you got into sports?
I started playing sports and doing things like in my basement, like casually and things like that, probably when I was like 3. And then I got into organized sports when I was 4 or 5 and started playing soccer, and then started playing basketball probably when I was 6.
I see. And then what drew you to soccer?
So my dad played soccer. My mom had nothing to do with soccer growing up. She had no idea what it even looked like or what it meant. She was a basketball person. And so my dad played, and they were kind of like, okay, like you can try it. And then I played, and from the very first game, I remember my parents were like watching me, and they were like, did you teach her something like at home? Like, why is she doing that? Like, I was 5 years old with like a bunch of 7-year-olds, and for some reason, I just naturally was like doing better than all the other kids. And so my parents were like, okay, this is weird. Like, I don't know why she's like this. Like, and so ever since then, I kind of had like a natural kind of knack for like soccer, and so they kind of focused on that. At first it was like them like, do you want to do this? And I was always like, yeah, like I said yes to everything. And so they were like, do you want to drive an hour and a half for practice 3 times a week? And I was like, yeah. And so I started playing in club soccer, which I came from a really small town, so that was like an hour and a half away, and that was 3 times a week. I started that when I was 8. I started playing on a U10 team for a club soccer team. So yeah, that was probably my parents that kind of started me there. But then I kind of was like, oh, I'm good at this. Like, I like being really good at something. And then I kind of fell in love with it from there, just because it came naturally. And then put all the time into it, you kind of just fall in love with it.
And it was just really big in your community too, right?
Yeah, so it was big in my family in general. I wouldn't really say it was big in my community. My community itself was not very athletic in particular.
Okay.
I was actually probably the first, I'm probably the first athlete to go to a Power 5 conference.
What?
From my area. Yeah, my area is really small and not really big in sports. We're more of an agricultural area.
Fits with Clemson.
Yeah. Hence why I came to another agricultural area. So yeah, no, it wasn't really an athletic area per se. Like, you go an hour and a half out to like more of a city and stuff like that. Like, that's where it kind of got big into soccer. But my community, I was the odd one out when it came to sports and the dedication that I kind of had to it. But for my family, it was a big part of life. Sports always was.
So tell me about one of your favorite memories involving athletics.
There's a lot. So my favorite memory, the first one that kind of comes to mind was my first really big experience with traveling for soccer. And that was, I got to go to Croatia and play in Croatia with our youth development, like Olympic development program. And we played the full Poland national team, the full Croatian national team, and the full, which one was it? It was Poland, Croatia, and another team, Hungary, that one. We played the full Hungary national team, and I was actually captain for that team. And I remember doing the shaking hands with the captain of the Hungary national team. And I looked at her and I was like, you could be my mom. Like, she was like 36 or like 37. And at the time I was like 16, 17. And we were playing against these grown women. And like, we were like a U18, U17 team. And it was amazing though. Like, we went to Croatia for 2 weeks, played in that tournament, which was obviously an international tournament. So we got like the little flags, and I have all the little flags from all the countries and everything, which was really cool. Stayed on the ocean, on the Adriatic Sea. We took ice baths in the Adriatic after games. We'd dig our toes into the sand to try to keep them warm. And then we also so when we went there, we ended up flying into Venice because of all these issues with our flights going there. And so we stayed in Venice for a day, got to tour Venice. We played a game in Slovenia as well, so we got to go in Slovenia. So it was a lot of traveling, but then it was the first time I really had an intense tournament for soccer. I come from such a small town, as I said, so like this wasn't really normal for me. I played in like club games, but this was the first time I was like, holy crap, like this is like really fast paced, this is really intense. So it was my first kind of introduction into like high level soccer, and it was really cool in that aspect as well. And I also ended up getting to keep like this really cool plaque at the end that was dedicated to our team because we represented the US at the tournament.
Okay.
And my coaches and stuff, they kind of deemed like most like the whole like most improved and like this and that and stuff like that. And so I actually got MVP for my team for the tournament. So they gave me like the plaque for that. So I have that back home, and it's like the select, like it has like thank you for like participating in the tournament in Croatia, and like from the select USA team and like things like that. And so that was a really big moment for me. They actually gave us like little like lavender is like a really big thing in Croatia, so I still have my lavender pouches and things like that. So super cute. I actually got to go on that trip twice, but the first one was really, really memorable because it was kind of like my first time kind of dipping my toes into the water of like really high level soccer. So
Now, was your team a club team that like represented the U.S.?
So basically what there is there's ODP, which is the Olympic Developmental Program. And so each state has its own team. Some states have multiple teams depending on how many people are in the states. And so New York has New York West, New York East, and New York South. And so I played for New York West. So if you make that team, then you get to go play in a tournament with them. Okay? So then once you play in that tournament, do really well, whatever. So if you're on that team, you can go to a camp in the summer. And you go to a camp for Region 1, which means like Maine to Virginia is the whole East Coast. And so all those teams like come together for a camp, and you make a team for Region 1. So it's like there's 4 regions. So there's Region 1, 2, 3, and 4. And so there's like 1 is like the Northeast, 2 is like the Midwest, 3 is like Southeast, and then 4 is like the West Coast, basically. And so I went with the Region 1 team, so that was really cool. Each region will typically go on one international trip to represent the U.S. So like sometimes they'll go to like Costa Rica. Sometimes we were originally supposed to go to Russia, actually, but then there were some issues, obviously, at the time with Russia. So they were like, we can't go to Russia anymore. Actually, we're going to go to Croatia. And so, I mean, it worked out really well. But yeah, so that was with the Region 1 team. I actually got to play. I got called up to a U19 national team camp my senior year of high school. So I actually got to wear like all the U.S. stuff and play with them for 10 days, I think, my senior year. So.
How old were you the first time you went for Croatia?
I was a sophomore in high school. Yeah, I was a sophomore in high school the first time I went. The second time I went, I was a junior.
Okay.
So I went 2 years in a row.
I see.
So, yeah.
And then what, out of all those things you said about the experience in Croatia, what stood out to you the most?
Oh, God. I would say the feeling of pride. We were a bunch of 17-year-olds playing a bunch of grown women that were like representing their country, and we were all just like shocked in general at everything, and the sense of pride that we didn't get completely demolished by these teams. Like it was like 1-0 games or like 2-1 games or like things like that. And like the second year we went, they actually ended up having 2 divisions, so we ended up playing people more our age, which was really good, because obviously playing grown women's a lot different than playing people who are still going through puberty, like you are, basically. And so the second time we went, we played teams that were like U18. So we played the U19 French national team, and they couldn't remember the last time they'd lost. And so they actually won the World Cup in their U18 World Cup and everything. So they were like really good. And France is like really well known. And so I actually ended up scoring the first goal in that game. So I scored a header in that game.
Baller.
Yeah. So that was really cool. So I remember scoring that, and they got that on camera, and like we were all freaking out. I remember I got tackled to the ground because we were like, oh my God, they're like so good, and like they don't remember the last time we lost. Oh my God, we're winning. Like that's crazy. Like the fact that we were even ahead like was insane. We ended up losing 2-1, so that was really sad. But I remember them complimenting us on being like, you guys like pressured us. You guys like, this was a really good game. This wasn't one where we were like, oh, okay, like we're gonna win. Like obviously they had to fight for it. Like they came back and won 2-1. So that was probably one of the best moments. And then I remember we went to Slovenia, which is right next to Croatia, and actually played the full Slovenia national team that year still.
Okay.
And we ended up beating them 1-0, and we found out they were ranked like 63rd in the world or something like that, and we were a U17 team playing the full national team that was ranked like 63rd in the world, and we were like, oh my god, we just beat them on like their home soil. And so that was probably another really big one, because we were really excited, because we were like, I mean, obviously they're not ranked like very high, but still like 63rd out of the world for like national teams was like really big for us, especially with 17 years old. So.
And their team is composed of the people they've worked together with for a while, and yours is just.
You were thrown together.
I
so
see. Okay,
so we don't.
Difference.
Yeah, so we don't get to really train. The only time that we train together is, so you go in the summer to the camp, play in the camp, get selected. By the end of the week, you make the team. They're like, these are the people we've selected to be on this basically select team for like Region 1. So it's like 21 people. And then after that, you go for Thanksgiving week. You miss school and everything, and you go to Boca Raton, Florida, and all the regions play each other in this big tournament. And so you're training at the beginning, but then you have 3 games that week. So like you kind of just train for a little bit, and then you all just play each other, and that's kind of your like getting to know each other. Then you don't see each other again until we go on our international trip, which was in March. So it was definitely like, we had to learn to play together too. So the fact that like all of our individual efforts kind of combined rather than more of like a group thing, because we're not used to playing with each other. So it was amazing to the fact that like we had probably like trained together like 6 times in total, and we still were able to like accomplish this thing. So
would you say up until then that was like your toughest game, since they're like older people? Not old people, but other national team that's been together for years?
Yeah, I would definitely say it was a shock to kind of see the cohesion of some of them, because like especially with like, I would definitely say that the second year with the U19 French team, like there's such a technical group and tactical group and things like that, and you could tell that they've been playing together for years. And you see us just like running around, we're like, okay, like you need to go over there and you need to go over there, and we're trying to figure things out on the fly, and you can tell that like they know what to do. Like they've been in these situations together before, whereas like we've been in the situations some like to an extent, obviously not to that extent, but each of us have a different experience with handling it. And so we also have a new coach that like also handles it differently. So trying to kind of mesh everything together was definitely a big challenge, but was also very interesting to try to overcome.
And since we're in like the marketing class and we had read some articles about facilities, was there a big difference coming from like a high school student and then going over there and playing on their fields and their facilities for the first time?
Yeah, it was really cool. I'd never really like, in high school, we never really had like locker rooms like out by the field. And so that was really weird for me. Yeah, and so that was really weird for me, because like we had like our jerseys like hung up in our lockers, and like it was really cool, and I was like, I don't know what this is. Normally we just had our stuff in our backpacks and we walked out on the field and we put it out on the bench and we played a game. There was never like the pregame ritual of like, oh, you're gonna sit in the locker room and do this and do that. And so learning like that whole routine in and of itself. And then we had to do an international walkout where I had to hold someone's hand and like hold the flag at the same time and like walk out and not screw it up. Like I still remember a picture of like our 2 teams walking from the locker room, and I'm like standing at the front, and like I'm such a little baby because I'm like 16 years old, and like I remember I was like, don't trip. Like, I just remember thinking, don't trip, don't go the wrong way, don't do anything wrong. Like, I'd never done anything like that before. And so the facilities was a big one, but like the traditions and the norms and things like that for the sport were also a big one. So, yeah.
So at this point, do you have any comments or believe that we missed anything important in regards to your most memorable sporting experience?
I don't think so. I think we covered it all.
Okay, well, we are done for the day.
Awesome.
Okay.
I'm gonna